a battle within me. This is an actual story time of myself and something that I'm struggling with um, because of my passion that I have. And that passion, one of those passions that I have is the passion of law. Like I love law, y'all. It drives me. It inspires me. It intrigues me. It's something that I have always had a passion for. But as I was going to school, even though the reason I stopped my pathway to becoming a lawyer was because of just life situations and being a single mother, even though I was trying to push through it, I just couldn't because I had to put my dedication and time into working and taking care of my kids. But that love of being a lawyer was always there for me. But one of the things that feared me the most when I got into law, the deeper I got into law, the more I start to realize how corrupt the system really was. Um, and the profession that I always dreamed of being in, I started having ill feelings about because I wanted to be a lawyer. And lawyers are some of the biggest liars. It is. They are. Um, and that is a direct conflict with who I am morally. Like, I have a hard time lying. So when I was coming to this realization of some of the things you might have to lie about or either kind of twist stuff so where you ain't actually lying, but you kind of are, um, that was always a big conflict. So I was always looking for a way to still try to get that information without lying. And a lot of times as a lawyer, you find yourself being pushed against the wall to where you have no other choice but to lie in order to defend your client. See, the thing is, they lie for the purpose of defending their client. And a good lawyer will do that for their client, especially if they are paying their client. Now, what you will find is a lot of people be talking about pro bono attorneys. They don't care. They're not real attorneys. Actually, y'all, they are. They're real attorneys. They're attorneys that go there and they fight for the cause. It's just they're not paid attorneys, or they're either on a lower pay scale to where really what they're being paid is pennies to what they would have been paid if that client would have came in and represented them. So a lot of people think those pro bono attorneys aren't real attorneys when in fact they really are. Every attorney that is barred by the state have to dedicate some of their time as an attorney for pro bono work or to help those that are less fortunate that can't afford an attorney. It's kind of an underlining thing all attorneys have to do. Now, some people, if they're attorneys and they have a passion for people, they will represent those people to the best of their ability, like they paying them $1 million. But if that passion ain't there and attorney is being not paid or compensated for the way that they're supposed to be compensated for, you're gonna get a crappy behind attorney on your case. They probably barely know your name, don't really know what's going on in the thing because they're not investing their research and their time into something that they're not getting paid for. But I admire an attorney who shows morals or shows empathy for people, even though I know that sometimes you have to learn to push that to the side to be an effective attorney in order to do your job. But sometimes when you do that, that eats you up inside. So to me, that was always a point when it came to that, especially with the criminal justice side, because that's what I wanted to get into. I was intrigued by the criminal justice side. And like I said, growing up, my brother used to get in trouble. So I used to always try to help him get out of trouble. So I always looked at if I got into criminal justice and my brother ever got into a situation, I was going to be there to want to help him out. But the more um, I got into law, and the more I truly understand how it all works and the powers that be that controls them all. It ain't as cut as dry as a lot of people think it is. And every attorney goes through a battle such as this. Your passion got to be so strong that sometimes you got to do stuff that you don't want to do because you just want to have that passion. And then there's others attorneys that get ate up so bad inside that they turn to alternative things to try to ease their conscience of what they have done to somebody. Whether it was they know the person was innocent and they was the prosecutor and they put an innocent man in jail, or whether they know they were the defending attorney and they knew their client was guilty and they got a guilty man off. You that stuff plays with it plays with who you are as a person because it makes you feel like, who am I? Why did I do this? Like, it would really tear you down. And some lawyers, I've read studies where the pressure became so much, lawyers have taken their lives to become getting in bad addictions because they couldn't overcome, even though the money was good. They had great money. Like, that's why I keep telling y'all people, money ain't everything. Money is not everything. You think it's everything because you have none. And then when you really finally get the money that you always wanted, you're going to find out you lost a part of your soul in order to get that money if you did whatever was necessary to get it. Uh, you know, this video I'm doing because it's affecting me because of what I'm now having to deal with. Even though I'm not an attorney, I still study up on laws and stay on top of laws just in case I have to help myself or if I have to help a family member. And it's a certain situation that's going on that this particular topic, I'm just trying to figure out, like, how can you as a lawyer do this? I mean, I get it. I get it. I get it, y'all. I get it. I get, because I literally just explained to you. I know, but some lawyers just don't care, and it's all about the money. Some lawyers just really don't give a rat's behind, and they just don't care. You know, um, and then it's almost as if it's forcing me to get into a position I don't want to be in, even though part of it I have to in order to properly protect the person I'm trying to help. You know? So this just done it this really has done struck up a battle within myself. You know, I I thought about a lawyer that I ran into. And y'all, in my 16 years as in transportation, I have ran into lawyers, doctors, millionaires, people who play for the NFLs. I have ran into celebrities. I have met corporate members in companies that run major companies that provide for some of the stuff that we do. I have met some very important people and have had some very in-depth conversation with a lot of people that filled me in with a lot of information, and I sucked up every one of those conversations and knowledge that they provided me. But in my 16 years of doing this, it's one in particular lawyer I remember. And I think I connected with him because of my own battle. So I sympathized with this man when he told me this story. And I'm not saying no names, but I'm not even giving you the details of what happened, but I can kind of give you a general of it. I picked this man up at a bar one night and he was drunk. And one thing about drunk people, I don't drink personally, but what I've seen from the people I have encountered that drink, when they drink, they're some of the honest people that you can possibly be around because whatever's in the inside of them is going to come out with that liquid courage, you know? And so, on top of the fact, A lot of people think when they have conversations that they possibly will never meet the person that they're telling these stories to. So it's almost like a therapy session for them when they're in a vehicle with a stranger that they may possibly never see again. Add a little alcohol in it, and you're gonna hear a lot of stuff, y'all. I have heard a lot of stuff over 16 years from various people that have gotten in my vehicle. Okay? And that was part of the thing that I kind of loved about being in transportation because I got to learn from a lot of people. And I kind of got to help a lot of people just from what I knew and how I could help. And when I tell y'all, I have met people with some serious money that has issues that money ain't going to take care of. This particular lawyer, he shared a story with me that night when he was drunk. He was drunk like crap. Yes, he was. But it was something about a case that he had taken that affect him. Even that case was years ago, but it still affected him to this day that I particularly met him. And in fact, it was one of the reasons at times why he was contemplating leaving law and stop practicing law and not being an attorney anymore, because the story in the gist of itself was his client was an innocent man, and the evidence was pointing as though he was guilty, and he knowingly put an innocent man in a position where he had to be stained for the rest of his life for a crime he did not commit. And although by doing this, he got the man less time than he would have gotten had they just would have went to court and just saw whether or not what the outcome was going to be. Now, when me and him had this conversation, I told him, I gotta be honest with you, sir. I don't think I could have did. I don't think me personally. I don't think I could have lived with that. I would have probably taken my chances and just went ahead and laid out what could and may not have happened to my client and took our chances and just trust in God. That's just the person I am, that he's going to get my client out of this. But I get what you are saying, because that's a battle that every attorney has to face when it comes down to something like this. So he convinced an innocent man to take a plea bargain that gave him less time, but stained his name, a very reputable man, for the rest of his life. And he was dealing within himself some serious battles that was overcoming him to the point where he was drinking himself, always going to the bars. He was having reckless lives that he knew could put him in a situation where, but this was his torment because of his choice he made, that he ruined this young man's life knowingly. Well, towards the end of the conversation, he was saying at that point that he was going to leave law because he couldn't handle being faced with that situation again. I end up running into this guy a few years later. But see, the thing about me is when I talk to him and I get to know you on a personal level like that, you will never leave I will never forget about you. It's just certain things, certain people I will never forget about. And I recognized him, but this time he was sober. And I was taking him from court. And he was telling me, he was sober. And he was telling me about the story he had told me prior in the car. But this time when he was telling it, he was skimming over a lot of things. But I already knew the story. And so, but he still felt bad for what he did. In fact, when I was picking him up, and I knew who he was right off the bat, I was talking to him about, at the time, I was dog sitting my youngest daughter's dog for her and her husband. It was a King Corsa. And that's kind of what struck the conversation up. And he was telling me to be careful because the first case in history concerning the King Corsa, it killed the person, and that actually what changed the laws when it came to dogs in certain areas pertaining to certain type of dogs. And I told him, I said, well, this dog had like a big old baby. Okay, I soon realized later on he wasn't as much of a baby as he appeared around people he knew. Okay, but he still was a sweet dog to us, probably not to others. But back to the conversation. We had got into another conversation, but this time I'm thinking, because I remember last time he told me he wasn't going to be a lawyer anymore. So without trying to let him know I knew who he was, I just kind of got into the story with him, and I was like, so how's everything going? Like, what happened? Like, you had court today, or what's going on? I'm trying not to really let him know I know he was actively an active attorney and all this. I mean, I even knew what a man stayed at, and that should have clued him in, because I didn't even use the GPS to take him home. I took him straight to his house because I knew who he was. And but I guess he was so caught up in the conversation, he wasn't paying attention that I picked him up in the courthouse and I took him home. It was over an hour away because I didn't need the GPS. I knew exactly who he was. And I was asking him about the court hearing and the date and stuff like that, and what had happened in court. Without, I told him, I said, I realize you can't tell me a lot of stuff, but how did it go? And I said, did you have court today, or was you representing somebody? And that's kind of how I got it out of him. And so he was like, no, I'm an attorney. Actually, I'm an attorney who I stopped practicing law, but something happened to my friend and it dragged me back to court. I had to make a hard decision to go back because something that happened to me in my past, and I kind of really don't want to talk about that. But he was like, something happened to me in my past that drew me away from practicing law. And I now found myself back in the same situation I was in with that client, but this time it's a very close friend of mine. And although I did not want to represent him, I know he needs me. And I know that if I don't, my friend is going away for a long time. But this time I know the thing to do for my friend. And unfortunately, it didn't work that way for the previous client that I had. And he was like, it almost felt like a redemption. He said, well, it ain't over yet, but man, it felt so good to be back in there. And he was like, just, so he was skimming over stuff, but I felt him and I understood what he was coming from when he was telling his story, because I already knew who he was. So the story of this is, we all face a battle within ourselves that we have to one day face, regardless if you try to overshadow whatever that is, run away from that. Life has a funny way of bringing you right back to the situation either you thought you got over or you thought you pushed to the side, which I think law is calling me back. And I honestly think that teacher I had that was darn near 60, almost 70 years old, that started her career when she was 50, I met her for a reason. Because now at the age of 50, I think law is calling me back home. And I'm going to do it. As always, be your brothers and your sister keeper. Keep God first. Until